Guys, this is going to be a great episode with Cody Nelson, the owner and manager of the Outdoorsmans in Phoenix. Before we get to this episode, I want to let you guys know that episode 145, what unit to apply for, Arizona Bighorn Sheep Fall 2016 Breakdown. I've gotten a lot of feedback from that podcast episode. If you are a sheep hunter, planning to apply in Arizona, that's a great one to listen to with Dar Colburn and Craig Steele and myself breaking down the units of Arizona. So make sure to check out episode 145. If you have any questions for your bighorn sheep applications in Arizona, feel free to email me at jscottoutdoors@gmail.com. I've been helping people kind of think through which units they're going to put in for, and the Arizona deer and sheep regulations. The deadline is coming up here June 14th, so it's about 2 weeks away. And now's the time to get in and do all your research. Check everything you need to check out now. That episode 145 is a good one. Guys, I want to thank you for your support of supporting the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. You can follow along our adventures at J. Scott Outdoors on Instagram, at Dar Colburn on Instagram, our Facebook page, J. Scott Outdoors. Our YouTube channel is growing every day. I've got a bunch of how-to videos and a bunch of turkey hunting videos and elk hunting videos and field judging bighorn sheep, field judging elk, Coues deer hunts. So check that out, J. Scott Outdoors on YouTube. Guys, I want to thank our sponsors, Wilderness Athlete, the Outdoorsmans, Phone Scope, Utah Hydrographics, Elk Hunter and Western Hunter magazines, and of course our title sponsor, GoHunt.com Insider. They have been a great support of this podcast, and without them, I wouldn't be able to put in the amount of time that I do into this podcast. So I would ask you to support them. Make sure to listen to the commercials and use the J. Scott promo codes when you call these companies or go on their websites. You're getting a discount by using the J. Scott promo code with all of these companies. Also want to thank you guys. You guys are the backbone behind this podcast. And I want to thank you for all the great positive comments that I get from you on my email, on my cell phone, through text messages, through Instagram and Facebook. And keep the questions coming. Keep the topics that you want to hear and the people that you want to hear on the podcast. I love hearing from you guys. Also want to remind you that if you listen to this podcast regularly on iTunes or Podbean, make sure you're following or you're subscribing. If you do that, each episode as I download them to the server will automatically go to your device and you can listen right away. If you're not a subscriber, which there are some that just listen and not a subscriber, it sometimes takes anywhere from 6 to 24 hours for the new episodes to be downloaded. Another thing, guys, if you could go on iTunes and leave positive comments and positive reviews and leave us a 5-star rating, that helps our placement with iTunes, and it just helps the podcast. So I want to thank you guys for all your support. Let's get right to this episode with Cody Nelson at the Outdoorsmans. And remember, you can call the guys at the Outdoorsmans and use the J. Scott promo code, and you're going to get a 10% off discount on all Outdoorsmans products. GoHunt.com Insider is by far the most valuable tool a Western hunter could give themselves. GoHunt.com Insider are the industry leaders and #1 source for Western hunting for a lot of reasons. GoHunt.com Insider have changed the game for how hunts and hunting information are found. Within a matter of minutes using Filtering 2.0, you'll be able to filter by state, species, residency, odds of drawing a tag, specific hunting dates, and harvest success percentages to find the hunts that fit exactly what you're looking for. If you are a guy that applies across the West or just in your home state but want to find some new opportunity, there's no better way to do it than using GoHunt.com Insider. As an exclusive offer to my listeners, if you sign up for a GoHunt.com Insider membership for $149 a year and use the promo code JScott at checkout, you'll receive a $50 KUIU gift card. Head on over to GoHunt.com/insider and get yourself the most valuable membership a hunter could have. I have known the owners of the Outdoorsmans in Phoenix for over 20 years. They are the authority on optics and hunting gear. Outdoorsmans is the leading designer and manufacturer of high-quality tripods, mounting accessories, and pack systems for all hunters. Their customer service is the best in the business. Go to outdoorsmans.com or call 1-800-291-8065 and use the J. Scott promo code to receive 10% off any Outdoorsmans products. Welcome to the J. Scott Outdoors podcast. Today we've got good friend Cody Nelson, owner and manager at the Outdoorsmans in Phoenix. Cody, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Jay. Good to be here. Thanks for having us on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Cody, since we've last talked, you have drawn yourself an Arizona Unit 23 South archery elk tag.
Yes, sir, I have. I don't know what kind of wave I'm riding lately, but I think I better start buying some Powerball tickets or something. I've had an antelope tag, a 13B strip tag, and this year I get drawn my favorite elk hunt on the planet, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going to stick it out and keep riding this wave as long as it'll let me.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you and I have spent a bunch of time in there. You've been on several of those hunts where I've guided in that unit, and you were there, and it played a huge integral part of Michael Park killing that big giant 435 bull, and it's going to be fun to...
That's my unicorn bull, Jay.
There it is.
That's my unicorn. I don't know if it's ever out there again.
You and me both.
we're going to give it a good whirl trying to find another one. That I'll bet you. I'll guarantee you that.
Yeah, you and me both for sure. It's just funny how those things kind of work out, but it's bittersweet for me because you drew a tag, and
well, yeah, I was going to say don't feel all down in the mouth on that deal. You drew a pretty good tag yourself.
Yeah, and I've been fortunate to be with you on the last couple bulls you've shot, and that's always fun, and that's why I say it's bittersweet. I drew a Utah Beaver archery elk permit, and it pretty much runs the same time, and so it'll be interesting to see how all the timing with this year's rut plays out. I think we've got a September 18th full moon, which I'm sure is going to play a little bit of havoc in everybody's plans this fall. But I believe the Arizona hunt starts on September 9th.
September 9th is what it is.
So I'm betting that first 4 or 5 days might be a little slow. I think as that moon grows, I think they're going to get more and more into it. And
Jay, we have so much fun with these elk hunts, and you know how much control we have over the animals and what they do. I'll just have to wait until you get done with your tag, and I'll just wait till the end of the hunt when you're around.
That would be awesome. I would be ecstatic if that's how that worked out, and hopefully it does. And it's interesting. We got some fires burning down there in the unit, and I'm up here in Carbondale, Colorado for the summer, but I'm monitoring the weather pretty closely, and it looks like this coming weekend you're looking at 115, 117 degree days in Phoenix, which, up there in 23 South, even though it's higher elevation, it's probably still going to maybe push 100 degrees in some of those units.
You're going to push at least upper 90s, 100, and I'm just praying that, and we're also expecting some, I thought I saw in the weather report on Sunday, it's either Saturday evening or Sunday, they were calling for some thunderstorms and rain. So, I don't know I just hope this fire lays down and they're just doing some maintenance and burning that probably really kind of is going to be beneficial to everybody.
Yeah.
If you
go ahead. if you look at some of these giant wildfires that Arizona's had, the month of June is pretty much when they have just gone crazy with the Wallow fire and the Rodeo Chetasky fire. And so, you just see these high temps and you see those, the conditions are perfect for fires. And it's just, this seems like this 30-day period, maybe 60-day period, we're all, all us Arizonans are just kind of holding our breath, hoping that, we don't get a lightning strike in the wrong place. And
well, interestingly enough, Jay, honestly speaking, that the area that they're burning right now, or letting burn, I should say, or controlling the burn, I believe that they have been and had the paperwork and had everything drawn up for the last 8 or 9 years. And it wasn't until they got a lightning strike, and it wasn't until the conditions were perfect, they actually wanted to do controlled burns in there, and they just couldn't get the conditions right, and they weren't willing to risk. There is some houses, and there's some, there's a lot of old growth timber, and I think they're trying to do it as smart as they can, but it took that long for a lightning strike, and then to have it be, the perfect conditions to where they could get in there and kind of do some good with it. And we are, like you said, we are in that window right now, but I'm just hoping to all goodness that it doesn't blow up on them. I just, for the safety of the firefighters and the homes around there.
Absolutely, for sure. Cody, on this episode, I want to talk about optics, and I want to talk about what you guys are doing at the Outdoorsmans. But for me, knowing you for so many years and being able to see you interact with customers and clients, and I get all of my optics from the Outdoorsmans and have for many years. One of the things that I think if people don't realize is they need to know that the guys at the Outdoorsmans are hunters first and foremost.
Absolutely.
And I think that gets a little bit lost when you start looking at some of the other optics, places where you can buy optics. And, sometimes people try and go for, the very best bottom dollar deal, which usually the Outdoorsmans can always provide. But they also have to realize, in my mind, talking to someone that knows the ins and outs, not only of the binocular or the rifle scope or the spotting scope or whatever they're looking at, but they know guys like that work for you and yourself know the applications that those binoculars and those optics are what applications necessary for these Western hunts that you guys do every day.
Absolutely. Jay, it's kind of like I've been using this analogy quite a bit lately, and it's kind of like golf. A golfer carries 14 clubs in his bag, and he's got a guy sitting there helping him that's an expert on the course, and he's got all this information coming at him. And I would say, well, there's guys out there that are the best golfers in the world that aren't. They've got the best information and the best clubs, and the clubs are fit perfectly to them, and they do all this for specific jobs at any given time throughout the course. Well, it makes them hit better shots, and I kind of like to think of optics that way, is that interestingly, I saw there was a deal on Facebook the other day, and people were mentioning like R-Heads versus Manfrotto and other manufacturers out there. And I thought it was interesting because everybody was going to draw a line in the sand and say, well, this head is better, and this is the only head to use. And I have to kind of lay back and say, you know what, guys, there's no perfect head or optic for every single situation. There are use specific tools out there that that's what we're good at providing people. The information is, explain to me what kind of hunts you're going on. Explain to me what kind of terrain you're going to be in. And I will give you and help you, or my guys will help you make the best decision that's going to help you throughout your hunts. Or, and some guys are like, hey, I want the best that's going to do, over a wide, variety of different terrains and situations and hunting styles. So there is no one best perfect situation for everything. I think in today's day and age, we got guys that are buying scopes for specific guns, for specific calibers, for specific hunts. We got guys that are buying binoculars. I just had a guy buy a set of 1032 ELs that are very lightweight, small binoculars, and he bought a one of our lightest tripods, the compact medium with a micro pan head, and then he literally bought a 65 millimeter spotting scope, and his whole purpose was, it wasn't for long distance, long range glassing. He knew what couple canyons he was going to be in, and he wanted the lightest weight, effective package to get up in there and get high and be able to look into those canyons and still be able to see what he was looking for. Those are the kind of things that are, I think, essentially make us different than a lot of other companies out there, because my guys are hunters. They're out there in the field. I expect them to take gear from the shop and literally get to know it, understand it, compare them side by side, and basically be able to give that hunter or customer that's calling every conceivable option that makes sense for him, and educate him. And then that way, I don't have to sell anything at that point. The customers at that point understand it and kind of get to know it, and they get to make a decision on what's best for them. So I think that's what
absolutely.
And Jay, I appreciate the platform to get us out there and talk about this kind of stuff, but I think that's what the Outdoorsmans, even before I got here, Floyd's been doing this for 34 years, and I think that's the difference is that he's always, been the guy out there in the middle of it doing it. And I'm not saying there's not other qualified people out there. I'm just saying be careful of who you're getting your information from, because whether you're at a golf shop getting it from a guy who's never even pulled an iron from a bag, or whether you're at a gun store getting a pair of binoculars from a guy who's never stepped out of the store, just be careful and make sure you get the information that is specific to what your needs are. And I think that's what ultimately makes us different than other companies.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Cody, I get a lot of questions on my email, jscottoutdoors@gmail.com, from a lot of my podcast listeners, and I've made kind of a list of them, and I just kind of want to burn through a few of the questions. I figured rather than me answering, I'll chime in and give my 2 cents here and there, but I figured having an optics authority like yourself answering them would probably be better.
I'd love to. Hammer away.
So one question we get is it easier to glass with one eye or two, and why? And believe it or not, I've actually gotten this question probably 7 or 8 times. So I think this is a great time for you to answer that question.
Let me. In what you're referring to is a lot of people. I think there's something that happens out there that when we get calls to the shop, it almost happens on a daily basis. They want a tripod. When we get to the point that we ask them, do they want an adapter for their binoculars? The almost essentially the first words out of their mouth. Well, no, I don't glass off a tripod with my binoculars. I just do it with a spotting scope. And I would tell you, Jay, that, and I'm going to answer the 2-eye question here in just a second. I would tell you that, number one, the 3 things that I absolutely try to get people to listen to is buy the best glass you can afford, put it on a tripod, and slow down. So if somebody would just do those 3 things, I don't care if you're upgrading from a $100 pair of glasses to a $200, or you're going from a $500 to a $2,000. Buy the best glass you can afford, put it on any tripod, and slow down. If you will do those 3 things, you will exponentially find more deer. Period. End of story. It's just the facts. When you're looking through binoculars, and this is when that guy makes that statement, I just do my spotting scope, I just use my spotting scope, I think it's the most inefficient use of your time to just look through a spotting scope, and I'm assuming you're probably going to ask me something about field of view later, is because that's a common question. The spotting scopes are such high power and such a narrow field of view that it takes me twice as long to cover the same amount, if the distance is the same, to cover those same areas. Whereas if I used a binocular with both eyes and a really wide field of view and having it steady on a tripod, man, you would be amazed at the movement and the number of deer and the amount of ground you cover in a much more efficient way and much more, quickly. And I think people just automatically find that they just see more game this way. Now, I'm not saying that there's not moments where you pick your spotting scope up and you're looking at a specific piece of dirt that's really, way far out there that you're not quote unquote glassing and looking for something. I'm not saying that can't be done, but to use it as your first or your only way of glassing, I think it's highly inefficient.
Yeah, I couldn't.
Well, and just looking at it, I think. And the other thing that I think people forget about is that, by the end of the season or by, I'm probably a little rusty right now. I haven't been out, but, being that I have a good elk tag coming up in September, I'll start scouting here and start moving around and start doing stuff and start looking through my glass a lot earlier in this season than I would say for a deer season. So by the time I get to September, when things are, when we're really starting to glass a lot, my eyes are, it's almost like I'm exercising my eyes. So, when you're using two eyes, and it's way more relaxing, your muscles in your face aren't all, contorted and trying to keep your one eye squint, from squinting. I would tell you that it's just way easier and way less eye stress. And, I got people that get headaches from doing, using one eye versus two. And I think people need to basically train and use the glass as much as they can. And it helps their eyes become stronger and, not so, strained, because your eyes are focusing and refocusing and moving, and you're constantly open. You're not blinking as much. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into to glassing. I'm hoping I'm answering your question and it gives you something to tell some of the guys that you come up against. But, I have people that, just can't close one eye, so we tell them to wear an eye patch. There's a few other products out on the market that, extend off spotting scopes and touch to your eye that help you keep your eye closed. Quite frankly, if you're doing and you're glassing enough, I think your muscles will get stronger and better over time. And by the time the hunting season comes, you will be in a much better place and not have near as much eye strain, by using your optics and practicing, so to speak, or training, so to speak. Just like you would train to run up a mountain as fast as you could, with doing weights and everything else. There's nothing wrong with glassing as much as you can to help your face muscles and your eyes to become stronger.
I want to take a quick break here, but then I want to ask you about training your eyes and how to get your game eye, quote unquote, on. So let's take a quick break.
Sure.
Have you guys heard about PhoneScope? PhoneScope is a privately held company that makes custom-molded, precisely engineered smartphone digiscoping adapters. Photographing wildlife has never been easier. Take digiscoping photos and videos from your smartphone and share them with your friends. PhoneScope stands behind their product with a 100% money-back guarantee. PhoneScope is the future of digiscoping. Get yours now. Use the JScott16 promo code and receive 10% discount on all purchases. Check them out at PhoneScope, that's PhoneSkope.com, or on Instagram at PhoneScope.
Wilderness Athlete is committed to improving the health and quality of life for the outdoor athlete by providing field-tested, scientifically validated nutrition and sports performance products. Check them out at wildernessathlete.com and use the JScott promo code to receive 10% off any order. Cody, I know that, you brought up a great point there. As the season progresses for me, I tend to get my eyes, depending on whether I'm hunting deer or sheep or elk or whatever I'm hunting, as the season progresses and as I get more days behind the glass hunting that particular animal, in the middle of a hunt or middle of scouting, I tend to get where I start to pick up and I start to recognize things that maybe 2 weeks before or a month before or 2 days before that I wasn't as keen on. Can you talk to me a little bit about how to get that game eye, and then once you get that game eye, how to increase and make your game eye as good as you possibly can?
Well, Jay, and first of all, that's people talk about that all the time, and the only true way to fully get that, what we refer to as, you're able to see those different shapes, sizes, colors, anything that would give away an animal's presence, whether they're hidden or standing out in the open, truly is time in the field. And we see it, I know that everybody, I don't care what industry you're in, but, whatever season it is, whether it's fishing or, I don't know why it seems, but everybody seems to wait to the last minute.
Yeah.
And I would just tell you that the more time in the field that you spend prior to a hunt, and the more time you spend behind your glass, the more your eyes will pick up on those colors, shapes, movements, anything will detect deer or elk or that you're looking for, faster, more quickly. And to me, it comes to time. I look at your eyes as being an investment on your hunt. And if guys, if they're just, and look, everybody has different scenarios and different, but if you want to be good at it and you want to be really efficient at finding game, you got to practice at it, like anything else in the world. If you want to be good at it, you got to put the time in. And I think that the guys that, they go buy a pair of binoculars, they put it on a tripod, they'll do good, but, maybe it takes them 3 or 4 days or 5 days or whatever before their eyes, are starting to become accustomed to what they're doing. Whereas, you take a guy that started, like for our hunt coming up in September, we've already been glassing for a solid month. And by the time we get, you can pick up an antler or a shine or the inside of a leg or a dark chocolate, brown spot or a butt, you can pick it up from miles away, and it's just, it becomes second nature. And it's only because your eyes are completely in tune with its surroundings. And it's just that ability to detect those small things and do them very efficiently and very quickly. And
I think another thing too is you mentioned slow down, and I think part of getting a good at game eye is I think you have to know when to glass quickly and when to really slow down and try and pick up, eyelashes flicking, tails flicking, a deer shaking. All sorts of stuff. And every animal has different characteristics. The yellow horn of a sheep that's bedded in the rocks, and all you see is the horn. You have to learn to train yourself to, glass quickly and then slow down, glass quickly, slow down, and you have to have somewhat of a mix of that, I think, in order to be efficient, because glassing quickly, you want to be covering those high percentage areas that, saddles and open areas and stuff where you think game are going to be moving through. But then there's also times when you want to, and even at prime time, you want to slow down and like really look into the oak brush or really look into the mesquite and try and catch that deer that's bedded, where all of a sudden you see a black nose and you realize that, oh, that's a Coues deer buck. He's looking right at me. He's, 400 yards away. And if you would have been going fast, you would have never seen it.
Yeah, Jay, that I think this, obviously the putting the tripod and the good optics is one thing, but I think, and I know you and I have sat on hills and watched people do this, and we've sat there and watched people do this together. You watch them get out of the truck, or maybe they just crawled up over their own little peak. They sit down, and we've been sitting in a place for 3 hours and seen 15, 20 deer, and they pull up over the saddle and they sit down and they look for 10 or 15 minutes and they just leave.
Yeah.
And you're like, man, it took us 2 hours to cover all the stuff that they just looked at. They don't even know that there's deer across from them. And it's just like, if you could reach into their mind and just go, hey, bud, just sit down and stay a while, slow up, just relax, enjoy the weather, enjoy the moment. And I promise you, if you're diligent with it and you stay after it, I've always, I think that sometimes, I made that statement to you about being frustrated with the strip, and I'm a glasser. I can will deer to stand up and come out of a tree, and and the strip will just there's the deer density is just not what it is in some of these other places, and you're just wanting to stay on it, and if you will do it, and you're in at least a decent area with deer, man, if you just be patient, things will happen.
Yeah.
And I just think people get way too big of a hurry.
Yeah,
I agree with you. Now,
Cody, you mentioned. Go ahead.
And by the way, I'm not saying that there shouldn't be times that you don't, like Floyd likes to call it power glassing, and it's when that you're in kind of a quote unquote a target-rich environment, and the deer are moving, and things are up, like a typical rut situation. And it's like what you were talking about. Those high percentage areas, you're banging around those from spot to spot to spot. Maybe you've been in there 100 times, and that's where the deer are going to. You're just kind of waiting, and you're just checking your hot spots. And there is an absolute time to do that, but there's also a time to slow down and methodically, break country apart. And you and I talked about grading before, and guys will say up and down, left and right. I don't care how you do it. I always let the terrain dictate, how I'm going to either grid a place, top to bottom or bottom to top or side to side. I let the terrain dictate that for me. And also, have I been in there before? Is it new country? But again, there are times to power glass, and there are times to slow down and be methodical and look at every single piece of dirt across from you.
Cody, I get the question a lot, what is field of view? And then I get a lot of questions, people asking me, should I get 8s, 10s, 12s, 15s, 32s, and why is field of view important? Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Field of view is simply, it's typically measured in 1,000 yards, and it's the number of feet that a certain power, basically it's 300 foot. A typical 10 by 42 binocular will have roughly a 300 to 300 to 330 foot field of view. An 8 power will typically have a 400 foot field of view. A 15 power drops to, or a 12 power rather, will be a 300 foot field of view. A 15 power will be like a 236 foot field of view. So let's just take those numbers a little bit. The field of view is when you're looking through your binocular, if you were to take at 1,000 yards in a known distance, and you were to measure from one side of your binocular to the other, okay, you would be measuring the number of feet that you have in your vision. So, Jay, the biggest thing that typically dictates on whether a guy wants a lot of field of view or a real wide field of view is the kind of terrain he's hunting. I know that I carry 8s around my neck and have for years when we're chasing elk, because my binoculars have a 408 foot field of view, and I can see a really wide swath of trees in front of me, And when you're trying to pinpoint, know exactly where that bull's going to break through the brush, and you get your first glimpse at him, sometimes that second, that just that millisecond that you see him before he sees you, you can make a decision on, man, that's a shooter bull or that's not a shooter bull. And maybe if you had a 10 power, maybe you didn't catch him coming in the corner of your eye, and maybe you had to switch your field of views and move left or right to pick him up, and all of a sudden he's on top of you before he got the best of you, and now you're caught and you can't make a decision that quick. I mean, maybe he's a good shooter bull and he's on top of you faster than you wanted to be. So I think field of view is almost always dictated by again, we talk about use specific tools. A guy that is going to glass at very long ranges probably doesn't want as much field of view. He wants power to really get in there and dissect the country. So I always look at it that generally speaking, 8s and 10s around your neck. I think a guy can occasionally get by with a 12 around his neck, because you have, there's a part of the equation that comes into this. When you have an 8 power that you're holding, your hand holding without a tripod, just on your chest, that will appear and will be less shaky and less movement, and it's easier to hand hold them than a 15, in contrast, than a 15 power. So you got 400-foot field of view of one, and then, you got 230-foot field of view on the 15, and you're trying to hand hold it on this very pointed little area. It becomes very difficult, and darn near, very few people can hand hold a 15 with any real steadiness.
Yeah.
So, and I think, Jay, that, maybe the first year, and I can't remember, I think the first year that the 1250s came out, I think maybe you were in 23 North that year, and you used the 1250s around your neck, did you not?
I did, and I find that 12 power for me is about the max that I can actually handhold. Just like you said, I have a little handshake as, the older I get, it seems like my handshake even more than, there's a little bit of a tremble. And so 15 power binoculars for sure I cannot handhold. I mean, I literally can't use them to just check a deer, if you're trying to shoot it. So I try and stay with, like a 10 power around my neck or a 12 power. But yeah, when those 12 by 50 Swarovskis came out, I used them for a whole elk season, and I love them. I'm going to tell you that I probably stick with my 10 ELs or my 10 EL range more around my neck, just because of that, fact of being able to have less shake, to be able to have that wider field of view.
Yep.
And, there's a happy medium, like you were talking, with field of view and power. And I get a question from a lot of people, and they're like, well, what is that happy medium? Well, my answer is a 10 by 42 binocular is pretty hard to beat in most applications. So if you just, a lot of people say, if you just could buy one, Jay, what would you buy? For me, a 10 by 42, and, I'm a Swarovski guy. I love Swarovski. Everything I have is Swarovski except for my big koas. But there's a lot of other great manufacturers that make 10 by 42 binocular, and I tend to tell people, if you're just looking for a good all-around glass that you can use from everything from, coos deer glassing to sheep glassing to, going in the, Dall sheep hunting, and even hand-to-hand combat stuff in the thick timber with bull elk or turkey, I think a 10 by 42 is pretty hard to beat for
sure.
An overall binocular,
yeah.
if you could just buy one.
Well, and I think, Jay, to add to that, I think I remember, Gino Wolcotti, which I know you've had on the podcast before. Gino's a 1050 guy, and he loves that piece of glass. And as duly noted, it's most people would completely. They don't understand that even if you have a 10 power piece of glass, and I would even make the argument an 8 power, if people put them on a tripod Okay. And granted, you're not going to use a 10 on, you're going to use a 10 mostly around your neck. But even if you put a 10 power or an 8 power binocular on a tripod, I think people would be really surprised of how much game they actually will see if they would just put those on a tripod and literally take a morning and spend scanning just like you would, if they were on your chest, but just really spend some time with them. I think people would be really surprised at how much game they actually see, and not just because they see it, oh my God, there's a deer standing right in the middle of my screen, but you'll catch that little movement of like a deer moving, into your screen, or maybe he's walking, or I don't know, maybe you catch a couple of does or a fawns running around, and all of a sudden you just caught that little movement out of your eye, and you move your binocular and oh my God, there's 3 or 4 deer standing there. So I think people would really be surprised by. I have a friend of mine that he's a Phoenix firefighter here in town. His name is Chase Grunwald, and he's a really good friend of mine. And his dad's been hunting and all over the Arizona, and it's just a great family. And I went on another buddy's elk hunt one time, and he pulls out a pair of 8x56 binoculars, which by the way is the same body, and it was really where the 15s came from, the 1556 Swarovskis, and he puts them on a tripod. And so I got to ask him and talk to him about why he does that. And really, Chase found as many animals as I did. He just maybe had to slow down a little bit and see those details at a longer distance. But it would be, people would just be amazed just by putting things on a tripod of how much more they can see even with less power. So going back to your whole thing about being versatile, a 10x42 on a tripod or on your chest, I don't know that there's a better combination.
Yeah, and I mean, I will even say that no matter what I'm hunting, when I have either my 10x42 EL range or my 10x42 ELs around my neck, most all the time I get to my glassing point wherever I'm at, and I pop my chest binoculars, either my ELs or my EL range, and I pop them because I have your Outdoorsmans bino adapter, and I pop them on the tripod. And I will usually spend the first 5 minutes whenever I get to a glassing spot looking with my chest binoculars, and I'm mostly looking fast, just scanning, trying to use that wide field of view, and just trying to cover pretty much everything that's in quote-unquote rifle range for me, 400 or 500 yards from me, glassing quickly, just making sure I'm not catching, missing a deer that's just up feeding, that, right away I could get either my hunter or if I'm hunting myself set up and get that deer shot. And then I'll go and put my chest binoculars in my bino pouch, and then I'll dig out of my pack my 15s, and then I'll start going to work.
Exactly.
And not that I'm not still looking close, but I think if people would just take the tip of when they first get to where they're glassing, use the binoculars that are around your neck and look at everything fairly quickly, close, and eliminate the gimme.
Exactly.
And then go to the bigger glass.
Cody Goff and I call that, you look for the easy targets and the escape routes. Give me the easy stuff and the places where deer or elk or, like if they were going to leave right now, we look at those saddles that are, we look at those easy escape routes and those easy targets. And we always do that with the handhelds. Now, I know you and Dar are pretty methodical about some of the stuff, but when Cody and I sneak over into like a canyon, one of us, we will both hit those escape routes and easy targets first. But as one of us is getting the tripods out and getting settled that way, the other is still scanning with, we are scanning all those easy targets. And then as that other person is getting set up, now Cody can go and put his binocular on a tripod and do that. So we methodically, we think about it, we're going into a canyon and sneaking over through a saddle, and we're trying to be as quiet as possible, but you're also trying not to let the easy things get away from you real quickly. Because you and I both know, we've watched people walk over a saddle and had deer lay down, literally yards from them. They didn't even know the deer was there, and the deer just lay down. Those deer are better at knowing our presence than we are.
And I think too, when you're disturbing and you're walking up, even if you're on the backside of a hill, you never know what might have seen you. They just hopped around, and if you have to wait that minute or 2 minutes to get your tripod, get everything set up, and get ready, that deer's already through that saddle. Whereas if you come up, you glass for just a second with your
Yep.
hand holding, you're just looking, but then you pop your tripod and you're just a lot of times my pack's still around on my shoulders,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I know that I need to scan that, but I also need to scan it quickly with my tripod. So a lot of times before I crest over, I'll have the tripod exactly in my hand, set up at the height that I want, and I'll just crest over so I'm not skylined, and then I'll just kind of sit on my knees basically and just be looking through my tripod, but really fast scanning. And that's actually helped me find some of those gimme
Jay,
animal.
what about the guys who, and we've all been in this scenario. Maybe you were late this morning. Maybe you ran into deer on the way up and you sat and glassed and you didn't quite to get to your, our little perch or eagle's nest where we can see everything from atop. And what if that was just a grueling hike? How many guys do you see, or have you been out with it, or maybe new to you, and they go charging up the hill and they blow themselves right up over the top, and then they stand there and they take off all their layers and they're breathing. They're not even glassing.
It's almost like they get to the top and they put their arms up like Rocky,
yeah,
like I made it.
Hey, I just won the battle, and I'm like, well, that's great, but you're losing right now. I mean, people, if they would just before you top out, like there's a lot of times where I'll top, before we even top out, hey, we'll take our packs off right there. We'll get our gear ready. We'll sneak up over the edge. We'll look at everything we need to, and then we kind of make it a slow assault rather than we just charge through the top and announce your presence with authority, because I just laugh at some of that people, and I'm not. It's not even trying to make fun of guys, but it's sometimes getting to that hill, maybe it was an accomplishment. I don't know, but I would certainly, not. I would try to be a lot less, noisy or skyline yourself or any number of things. I would rather just be quiet and take a breather on the backside of the hill and then slowly walk up and get into a good glassing position.
Yeah, for sure. We're going to take a quick break here.
Sure.
But to add to that, one tip I can give people is pretend that the deer or the elk or the sheep or whatever you're hunting, pretend they're going to shoot back at you. and if you keep that in the back of your mind, and I did not serve in the military, and I love all of our guys, that men and women that have, but I've hunted with some guys that have been in the military, and they have that approach because they're used to people shooting back at them. But even if you're on a deer hunt, if you go up there with the mentality that animal can shoot back at you, you're going to act everything you do is going to be different than if you just think that and when you're thinking that they're going to shoot back at you, they're really shooting back at you with their eyes. If they see you, the gig is up. So think of it like, hey, if I just come blasting over this hill, they can shoot me dead to rights. You're going to act differently.
Well, and Jay, there's another thing too that I always laugh at, and I know we got to go to a break here real quick, but there is nothing more dejecting to go and look. We're talking about other people making the mistake, but you and I both know.
I've done it 100 times.
I was going to say, let's be honest with each other.
Yeah.
We've all made this mistake, but you go charging up through the hill. And all of a sudden you like, and I'm talking more whitetail on this kind of deal, but all of a sudden you see the white flags waving goodbye to you, and you're like, and the big buck just follows him right over the deal, and you're like, well, that was a whole lot of waste of, getting up here for nothing, because the deer that I wanted to, be looking at, they're gone. And I would just rather slow down. Not be so crazy going through something, but I like your thought of the deer shooting back, because that might just make people slow down a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Let's take a quick break here.
Yes, sir.
Utah Hydrographics is in the water transfer printing service, and they are open to whatever you can dream up. Choose from a wide range of camo patterns, designs, and colors. Whether it's guns, bows, tools, rifle stocks, vehicles, steering wheels, fenders, dashboards, paint guns, fishing rods, cups, tripods, watches, knife grips, helmets for a local sports team or for your motorcycle, picture frames, mailbox, animal skulls, you name it, they can probably do it. Utah Hydrographics loves taking things that are general looking and turns them into something that looks fantastic and eye-popping. Give them a call and see what they can do for you and receive up to a 10% discount by using the JScott16 promo code. Visit them at utahhydrographics.com or on Instagram at Utah Hydrographics. Whether you are interested in elk, deer, antelope, bighorn sheep, or moose, Western Hunter and Elk Hunter magazines will bring the adventure to your mailbox. These publications feature articles on the finest hunting gear, tips and tactics from experienced hunters, field judging trophies, glassing techniques, calling strategies, and much more. To become a more knowledgeable and skilled hunter, subscribe today. Go to westernhunter.net/jscott and enter your email address for a chance to win a $1,500 credit towards any Swarovski product.
Cody, another question that I get a lot from people is they say, I have an 8 or 10 power binocular, and I can either get a pair of 15s or I can get a spotting scope. So, and then some people ask me the same question. They say, I have a mediocre pair of 8x10 chest binoculars, and I can afford to buy a high-quality spotting scope, or should I buy a great pair of 15s and have an average quality spotting scope? And I guess it depends on the day you ask me, and I answer it differently. Just sometimes maybe I feel them out a little bit, but it's a question I get a lot, and I'm curious how you would answer that.
Again, Jay, there's never any wrong answer, because we can make that scenario fit for just about any situation, but it is not. We get that scenario a lot. Number one. Number two. If a guy has, let's just say a guy has a set of, matter of fact, it's funny that we're talking about this, because I just had this conversation with your nephew. Mm-hmm. Jay was talking about, hey, look, I've got a good pair, meaning I think he has the Viper 1042 HDs from Vortex, which, in its own right is a great, to me, it's a great start-off binocular. It's a really good quality binocular.
And you're talking about my nephew, Jay Pyburn,
yes,
by the way.
Correct.
Yes.
And so, we started to talk. I'm like, that is not a bad pair of binoculars. You can use it on your chest. You can put it on a tripod, and you're going to find game. You're going to be good with it. So the next scenario was, okay, so if I have that pair on my chest, do I sell those, and what do I start doing to get into the next level? And for me, it's real simple. If you have a good pair of chest binoculars, I would rather see a guy go with a really good pair of 15s, if that's what he so desires, and then someday, obviously he can get a spotting scope as well. But there is an argument. So I've had guys that, they're happy with their chest binoculars, and we make it so they can mount it on a tripod. And I have guys that'll go full bore, and they want a good spotting scope because they can find the game pretty good, but then they really want to be able to study it with the spotting scope. Jay, there's no real wrong answer in that equation. I think it all comes back to when a guy gets to those levels. Again, buy the best glass you can, put it on a tripod, and slow down. So if you do those three things, all those scenarios are working for guys.
Yeah, and I think too, I ask guys, how much into trophy hunting are you, and how important is the size of the buck or the bull or the ram or whatever you're hunting, or how important is it? Is it a 105-inch buck, or is it a 108-inch buck, or is it a 112-inch buck? Can you? And they ask me, well, can you tell the difference with 15s, whether it's 100 or whether it's 75? And I say, absolutely. They say, well, can you tell the difference between a 90 and a 105? And I say, most of the time, yes, depending on distance. Then they say, well, can you tell the difference between a 95 and a 105? And I go, sometimes you can't.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Jay,
that's
what
when
about,
having the spotting scope.
I think this is a great scenario. We have a number of guides that call from, north of the border, and a lot of sheep guides either way. But a lot of those, they have to kill full curl rams, or they have to be a certain age class, right?
Yeah.
Well, look, I've never been on a sheep hunt. I have glassed for Dall sheep. I've seen what they look like at distance through binoculars. Again, that's one of my bucket list deals, and hopefully one day I'll get to do that. But I talk to those guides every single day, and they'll tell you. I've talked to Floyd. I've talked to all the guys that have hunted Dall sheep and stone sheep and the whole deal. It's not that they're the most difficult animal to pick up, but when you got to start looking at growth rings, and you got to look at, exactly, does that ram come full curl or not? Those guys are more apt to use a 10, but then they need the power to really study it with the best, bino or the best spotting scope they can get. So there's a scenario where, that guy, he's got to use his binos, and then he's got to really study him with a spotting scope. And you know what? And that, that's a legality thing. So those guys, they're not supposed to. I mean, they're not, they can get in trouble if they screw up. Yeah. So, that's their livelihood. So I think that there's scenarios, again, and I'm going to use the term, use specific tools that make all these scenarios work for guys. The one mistake I would think that people make the most, and Jay, I know over the years with you guiding, and I've been in enough of camps, the one guy that I always kind of think misses the boat a little bit is the guy that literally buys the 15s and nothing else. He's like, now he's got like a one-trick pony. He's looking at far distances, and then he's trying to use them as a chest binocular, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work, and that's my answer to a lot of guys is, if you're a coos deer hunter specifically and you want to hunt coos, I think 15s are essential. I think if you're not as detail-oriented, you don't care whether the buck's 100 or 105, you're going to shoot it either way, I'd go with just the great pair of 15s.
Yep.
If you're a guy that, really wants to get into trying to, shoot a buck that's, or a bull that's a certain size and you really need to start nitpicking those antlers, I'm going to tell you that probably a 10x42 on a tripod and probably buy the best spotting scope that you can afford and go that route.
Yeah.
So back to one thing you had said earlier in our conversation, to me, my eyes were completely opened. The first pair of good binoculars I had was a pair of Zeiss 10x40, the black ones, they're just the standard, the old stamp. Yeah, the classics and great. The glass in them was great, and I didn't use them on a tripod. I mainly just handheld them. And then Dara and I, from the Outdoorsmans, got our first pair of 10x42 SLC Swarovskis, and we mounted them on a tripod. And at that time, it was like a Webster's. It was like a Velcro
that was the old
mounting.
Yeah, it was the old original Webster bar, which then became the Sherlock. And it was a machined bar with pads on it with Velcro loops.
Yeah, and once we got those, I mean, even as archaic as I would say they are now, and I would probably laugh if I saw someone using them. Not that you can't, because I used to, but the difference between the solid bino adapter stud that you guys make is a completely different system and totally way better. But going back to that, using that Velcro system and being able to sit down with 10x42 SLC Swarovskis, it changed our game.
Well,
I mean,
absolutely.
we went from hiking every ridge to just jumping deer and doing all that to just, we thought we could see everything. And honestly, I think with a good pair of 10x42 binoculars on a tripod, You can be deadly.
Well,
I wouldn't let anybody tell you couldn't be. And yes, there's applications where 12s and 15s are fantastic, and I use 12s and 15s, but a 10 by 42 on a tripod, you can glass for anything.
Jay, and I'm not even embarrassed to say this, because back in the day, the glass to have was like 1040 Classics from Zeiss and 1560, from Zeiss.
Yeah.
And those were like the big dogs. I mean, that if you saw somebody with those, you knew that they either knew what they were doing or that they were really good at what they were doing. And I used to figure out, there was a time when I used to have surgical tubing, and I was trying to figure out how to take and don't laugh at me now, but I used to have a pair of 9 by 25 loopholed pocket binoculars. And back in those days, those were actually, they had the lights.
Yep, I remember those lights.
They were like an OD green.
Like an 8-powered light.
Now, I'm going to say this, I'm going to make this announcement, because if anybody found those, and they were, and you know how rough the road is to Turkey Creek, going to Parsons Grove and 32. If anybody found those 9 by 25s, I'd like them back. Because they're still sitting out there somewhere, and I think I know exactly where they're at, but I have made it back in there a few times on different sheep hunts and coos deer hunts that I've never been able to fully retrace my steps, but somebody has my pair of 9 by 25 loopholed lights binoculars that I'd like back. If somebody would just please let me know they have them. And by the way, that was, I think, that was almost 20 years ago.
It's amazing to see how far. Actually, let's take a quick break here, Cody.
Guys, I want to thank you for listening to episode 148 with Cody Nelson of the Outdoorsmans. This was such a good interview and episode, I decided to break it into 2 parts. So make sure you catch episode 149, part 2 with Cody Nelson on the next episode.